Yarva. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you guys doing? I found this kind of funny subreddit, Ameristralia, about things, like American and Australian, obviously. So I'm excited to react to some topics from this subreddit. And the first one that I found that caught my interest was this one. Australians living in the US, how does life compare? I want to limit the scope of this, I'm not going to do that accent, to only include people who have actually lived in both countries. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm a dual citizen, but I've always lived in Australia. I'm thinking it might be time to move to the US to see how life might be different. Cost of living, cost of housing. What's the job market like in Texas, New York, Florida, or California compared to Australia? Is it generally easier or more difficult to find a job, assuming for like... I don't know what that means. That must be Australian talk. Assuming for like? Assuming like... Oh, like for like. I was being dyslexic. Okay. Like for like job. I guess more importantly, can a single person afford to own or rent their own home on an average income there? I feel like the answer to that question is it like radically depends on where you live, including within the states. I mean, the states are really big. You know what I mean? Like Texas is a giant state. So it depends where in Texas you are. But I'm interested to see actually from the comments themselves, because these are people who lived both in Australia and America. I've certainly never lived in Australia. So, direct comparison by someone who has lived both places. Moved back to the US 10 years ago, came back to Australia for a bit post-COVID. Now back again. It's awesome. More entertainment, more things to see and do, and for career opportunities in my industry, I get to do things that could never be done in Australia. I have a house that I could never have afforded had I stayed in Australia. I wonder where this guy lives. As someone who had been through rentals all their life, that was huge for me. It's kind of funny because I live in a really boring part of America. I mean, if I drive any direction in a couple hours, I can be to an interesting city. But where I live is boring. So when he says like more entertainment, more things to see and do, it's just a little bit interesting to me because to me, Australia just seems so interesting and entertaining. Anyway, as to your costs and income, that highly variable. You'd have to state your career, experience, goals, location, etc. And even then, you'll only get a mild estimate. As a dual citizen, you totally avoid the complete and utter mindfuck that is the U.S. immigration and can set up shop there easily. I think you'd be mad not to try it given your specific circumstances. Even if things don't work out, you end up back in Australia. Could be worse. That's an interesting point, huh? I mean, that is pretty cool disposition to be a dual citizen and you can just give it a go, Especially if you don't have like a family. Even if you do, I guess you just move them over here, huh? How does that work as a dual citizen if you have a family, like a wife, that's not a dual citizen? I can afford a home in Texas. I never would have been able to find one comparable in Australia. It is true, Texas has very cheap homes, very large, cheap homes. They just have a lot of land and very cheap property taxes. So yeah, you can find a really big ass house in Texas. If I were being careful but not strict on my food budget, the weekly bill would be about $100 to $120 for two people. $100 to $120. Being broke, you could get it down to $70. In Australia, there's less care about tertiary education when you're looking for work. In the US, they're still mostly hung up on entry-level jobs requiring a degree. That's tertiary, huh? That's like the first time I've ever actually seen that word spelled out, weirdly enough. That's an interesting observation. I had never heard that before. It's definitely like a big gateway for entry here in America. You kind of, for a lot of jobs, a lot of entry-level jobs, you're not even really allowed to apply without a degree. The things I miss about Australia is how physically beautiful it is. There's nothing in Texas that even remotely compares. Same with Indiana. America is beautiful, right? It's a gigantic country like Australia, but there's beautiful parts in America. It ain't Texas and it's definitely not Indiana. And unfortunately, I personally have to travel quite far to find a beautiful place. Don't even bother going to the Gulf of Mexico for your ocean fix. Really, I like the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that just goes to show, I guess, how low my standards are. Just because I live in Indiana, so, going to any ocean is nice to me. But he's saying don't even bother going to the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. Politics and social issues are just awful here. I'm not going into it, but this country is regressive. Hard to argue that, the social issues are not only awful, but have gotten worse in the politics. They've gotten worse on both sides. On both sides, gotten worse. It's all a shit show. At the end of the day, I got bored in Australia. I love to visit, but I'm happier living in the US. Wow. It's actually kind of interesting. I read so much hate toward America. It's actually kind of interesting reading people who like some love for America. Bonus, US is way closer, cheaper, and easier to travel to Europe. That's a funny thing because most Americans don't do that, But I guess that's true. We are closer, a lot closer. Huh. You guys are much closer to Japan. American and Australia perspective. If you're going to the US to be rich, it's great. If you're going to be poor, it's terrible. That's kind of an interesting point. America's definitely kind of ruthless in that way. You get all the spoils if you're rich. If you can find a way to make the money here in America, great place to live. If you're poor, watch out. That's rough. That's a really good point. If you can land a job making 100K or more over there, you'll feel a lot richer in the US than you would here on an equivalent salary in Australia. If you're struggling to find good paying work here, you're not going to have a good time there either. I came to Australia to be with my partner, and my general impression here is it's pretty easy to get ahead in your career, but the higher tax cost of food and Australian tax on goods makes it harder to feel like your great salary is getting you anywhere. Groceries in the US are so damn cheap that you can live like a king if you're happy to cook for yourself. Interesting. Wow. Interesting perspectives in here that I've never heard before. I honestly didn't even know our groceries are that cheap. I mean, I've gotten hints of it, right? It's a little bit difficult because you guys obviously have a different currency. So when I see prices, I don't always convert them to USD. But for instance, I saw a 30-pack of Coke in Australia was $60, which is ludicrous. Now, of course, that's 40 US dollars, which is still ludicrous. Ludicrous for a 30-pack of Coke. Oh my God, I just can't believe that. To be honest, if you find a good sale on Coke, you could get that for $15 here. Okay, I moved to the States 18 months ago. I was a ringer working cattle stations in far north Queensland, and now I'm a cowboy in Idaho, Montana, and Nevada. I work in an industry, that's pretty cool. I work in an industry that isn't known for paying very well, but it's a lifestyle. Healthcare is the thing that I find crazy here. A couple years ago, I was riding a bull and got busted up. Couple of surgery, 8 nights in hospital. The cost was $0. This is in Australia. That could bankrupt you in the States, for sure. Decent health insurance is expensive. Absolutely it is. $1,000 a month. I mean, really, to get good health insurance. Getting my head around, that kind of goes back to if you're rich here in America, it's a great place to live, right? Getting my head around how divisive politics is here is a bit of a mind bender. Yeah. It's so partisan that you can't really reason with people. True. A lot of people have picked a side and can't be told anything. So true. They view it as like a team. A lot of people don't actually have any fundamental values that they stand on. You know what I mean? They just view themselves as either on team A or team B, and they'll, flip on a dime on an issue if it means that they, to stay with their team, or, one day they'll say something's bad, but once it's against them, they're like, no, it's not bad, it's good. I don't know if that made any sense, but you know what I mean. I love and miss Australia. The landscapes and experiences I've had on the bush and surfing are unbelievable when I look back at them, but sometimes I just think it's culturally a bit vanilla, especially as someone working in the cowboy realm in the US. is really unparalleled for opportunities and access to knowledge, landscapes, history, events, music, art. Nowhere is perfect. If you're thinking about it, just do it. You can always go back to Oz. As an American now living in Oz, I'm very surprised at the lack of comments regarding work culture in the US. Much less time off, more micromanaged and strict, worse wages, less rights, etc. Work life is one of the reasons I don't think I can ever go back to the US. Working there feels like hell and you feel like you can't get a break. Interesting. Obviously, that's a very common critique of America. You know, the work-life balance here is garbage. The vacation is garbage. I'm in the US right now working on moving back to Australia. Harder for us as my husband has a health issue. Not a good thing in America. I think as we have kids, Australia is a better place to raise them. It's safer. I'm also in the Midwest and not into religion. Red state politics and hunting. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm in the Midwest too, and I'm not. I'm not into hunting, and yeah, it's definitely a different place to live. You know, there's a lot of different types of places to live here in America. So that doesn't help. I actually would earn more in Australia, but I know for a lot of people, it is the other way around. Maybe if I was single and in a huge city, I would prefer to be there. But since I have kids, I think Australia is better. Depends what you do for work. Depends where you want to live. I'm an Aussie, but I've lived in New York since 2004, and I love it. Miss Australia heaps though, and if you have kids, I think the quality of life is better in Australia. This is very interesting. You know, usually I don't hear this type of discussion being broke down with such nuance and such interesting perspectives. Like the divide about having kids, it's better to raise a family in Australia. I could see that, you know, on average, it's a safer place. I know there's more laws, such as the new social media law, that protect kids, you know, and the people who made the point about, you know, if you're rich in America, great place to live. If you're poor in America, it can be a brutal place to live. That just makes a lot of sense. That's very true. Wow, that was very enlightening. I actually really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that was interesting to some people. It certainly was to me. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.